All right, good morning and welcome back to the VIP seat. Today is September 9th. I cannot believe it's already September. I am off the road finally and will not be dropping off this call like I did our last podcast. But it's me, Jessie, Naor, and Preston, Holland. We're back here as usual, ready to kick off the VIP seat.
Jesse, wake me up when September ends. For those of us who are in the 30 to 45 age bracket, that's a funny joke. But September, it's the end of the second or the end of the third quarter for those that are accounting, and everybody's ramping up in transaction world, getting ready to see what the fourth quarter brings. So, as a reminder for everybody in transactions, we work hard in the fourth quarter so that we can play golf in the first and second quarter. So, it's time to gear up. It's time to put your hats on and get ready. So, welcome to VIP Seat, where we bring you the top 5 stories in business aviation every week, designed for your commute. And don't forget, share this with somebody, share this with a professional that works in aviation, whether they're in scheduling, dispatching, charter, transaction. We have a little bit for everybody. And even those that are in regulatory, we've got some stuff for you. This week, we cover every aspect of business aviation. So I guess we should jump into the first story. It is time to ring the M&A gong. Gong.
Ding. Yes, we have more M&A news, which is great. I mean, for everybody in the industry. This one's an interesting one, though, because, I'm a former customer of all of these different companies. So Universal has sold its trip services department to World Fuel. And a lot of people who aren't in the charter industry may go to themselves, what is trip services? What do they do? Well, these are the folks who, when you're flying overseas, let's say to Zimbabwe or Europe, anywhere that has weird and varying laws, which inevitably every single country does these days. Companies like Universal, Weather and Aviation, they do all the flight planning, they do the permitting, they do the request. And this can be quite expensive. We're talking about thousands of dollars for a simple trip, tens to 50,000 for really complex long trips. So it's not the first time that World Fuel, actually it's World Connect now, which I could never remember that they changed their name to, that has done this acquisition. They actually bought their fuel card that they had, and now they're buying their trip support services as well.
So, Jesse, as someone who is pretty ignorant in world travel ops, walk me through why someone in the fuel business gets into the overseas trip support. I'm trying to piece that together and I'm having a hard time.
Yeah, because generally speaking, when you call someone to do like your dispatch for you, guess what you're also booking at the same time? Your fuel releases. So that's why World Fuel, they've purchased a number of these different companies. They purchased Epic Fuels, I believe, a year or two ago. They're getting into all these different, it's basically any support service associated with the flight. I think they're thinking they're going to get first grabs or first dibs at that fuel ticket as well, which obviously is the big ticket item for these big business jets. So you call Universal or you call World Fuel and they just take care of everything for you, especially if you're a corporate flight department that doesn't have a big team. They do it all.
So I've got some of the highlights here for the transaction overview for those of us number nerds. This comes from the Jeffries release. September 3rd, 2025, a wholly owned subsidiary of World Connect Corporation, publicly traded, has signed a definitive agreement with Universal Weather and Aviation to purchase Trip Support Services, TSS, vision for $220 million. Jeffries acted as financial advisor. Haha, gotta get a good plug in there. The successful transaction marks Jeffries' 83rd deal in the aviation services sector since 2015. Congratulations, Jeffries. Probably some good fuel or some good fees on a $220 million clip. So $220 million. I mean, I don't know, call me small-minded, but I feel like that's either a huge multiple of revenue or trip support services is way bigger than I could have ever imagined.
I think it's much bigger than you imagine. I mean, I can't tell you, look, as a light jet operator, that's not something we would use a lot, but you have no idea, I mean, how often these rules are changing. There's also some relationship, and I've never fully understood this. NBAA has personnel at air traffic control, like at the FAA traffic management service desk. And I think Universal also has access to that as well. So they're really, trip support, flight planning, you think is not really a big deal, but these are really, really big deals. And there's a lot of back and forth. I mean, think about all the European rules on fuel taxes now. knowing what taxes to pay and what location and who's handling that and who's making sure the payment gets through. Talking with people in the Caribbean about what customs paperwork is going to be done at this island because this island is a little different from that one. So they're into a whole bunch of different things. And it doesn't seem like a lot, but look, probably all the flights that leave the United States, they're all using trip support services. Nobody's doing this on their own. Their pilots are not going to do it on their own. So I think it's a much bigger business than you'd imagine. I also imagine it's a pretty lucrative business because there's no real assets involved. This is really a relationship, personnel heavy thing. And there's a lot of money involved.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. This is very interesting. I mean, I wonder, I mean, look, if you've ever been to a MBAA event, you know that the fuel parties throw, or the fuel companies throw the best parties. Get your
Mm-hmm.
invite to the parties because they are fantastic, which means that all the money in this business is probably in the fuel companies. So they've got a lot of dry powder buying for 220 million, probably just a blip on their radar. If they get incremental fuel flow, like pretty, if they've got the network of fuel in the different support providers, I can see this being a pretty big lift for them. So I think the $220 million probably has a lot of the synergies already baked into it, if I had to imagine. But still, $220 million TSS and your founders, if you were privately owned, congratulations. Let's go shopping for your own business jet because it's about that time.
Yeah, they're actually going to continue. So, for those who don't realize this, Universal also owns Air, Cool, and Air. And again, if you're not in the charter space, but if you are in the charter space, everybody knows Air, Cool, and Air because they're the largest catering company out there. They service practically every single airport in the US. I was a former customer of theirs, and I'll tell you, if I needed a crew meal at 3 a.m., they could figure it out. They were one of the only companies that could do that. They've also come under fire for how much their services cost, but it seems like the company is going to continue on with the FBO and the air cool and air business and make that more of their focus. So probably a really good deal for both sides. Someone got a little bit of a cash out and ability to focus more on that highly lucrative catering company.
Yeah, no kidding. I know that Ken Rickey has spoken publicly that catering is on his radar of things to fix because FlexJet is spending a ton of money in plastic forks, like more than most anybody's going to make this year in revenue is what FlexJet spends on forks. It's a big, big problem to solve, but catering's an interesting one. Well, that brings us into everybody's favorite segment of the week, which is Mile High Madness. This is where we at the DIPC scour the internet to find you the funniest, most ridiculous things on the internet as it relates to business, private, and commercial aviation. And Jessie she's got a doozy for us.
Yes. So again, I don't share this with Preston before the show because I want to see his authentic reaction to this. Some of you may have seen this before, but it's just one of my favorite internet
Greta.
memes. It's Greta Thunberg. Getting the fuel tanks filled up there. For those who are not watching the video version of this, which by the way you can see on YouTube, Spotify, almost everywhere, it's the picture of Greta Thunberg saying "How dare you!" right on the outside of a Jet A inlet while it's getting fueled, and it's just a classic, and it's really funny. Yeah, if you're someone who doesn't like that, I don't know what to tell you.
That's just good stuff. I mean, Greta, she can't, what was she was doing something recently where she was going on some tour, and I'm sitting there going like, "Hey Greta, how are you getting around? Are you walking or are you riding your bike? Because that's the only like net green neutral." And it's like, well, what about the rubber tires? And what about the metal? And what about the transport of the bike when you bought it? It's like,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
she's gonna go up there
Well,
and land that
she
finger.
continues to run these flotillas towards Gaza, where she's going to donate all of this, massive amount of humanitarian aid that she can carry on a tiny little ship. But every time she gets within like 100 miles, the IDF obviously turns her around. So it's like, what are you really doing, hon? Are you just like burning fuel out there in the middle of the ocean for no reason, or political stunt, or what? But that's
How
Greta.
dare you? How dare you,
How
Greta?
dare you?
How dare you? No, that's a good one. Jesse is running driver's seat for mine. This one came, if you remember this, I think this video is a couple of months old, but if you remember, there was a lady who was in a national park who had to get picked up by a helicopter for an emergency service. So if you remember this lady, and when they picked her up, this is kind of like Jesse is a former helicopter operator. So for those people that don't know that, Jesse is a helicopter gal. Preston is not really so much a helicopter person. And this is reason number 329 why I really don't get close to helicopters. Because look at this lady. For those listening, it's a helicopter picking up a stretcher, and the stretcher is circulating about as fast as the rotor blades are, and they just can't stop it. And it's like, and it says grandma broke her nose hiking and didn't want the what is it? And didn't want the what was that
Helivac.
word? Yeah, didn't want the helivac. Me neither. She won 450K lawsuit. I don't know if she actually won the lawsuit, but honestly, if that happened to me, I don't know. This is exactly why I'm not really a helicopter person. It's for stuff like this. It's like this is terrifying, and she can't get off. That is a ride that she can't get off until they put her on the ground. One grandma zero helicopter one. At least she did get the helivac. So I don't know. This is pretty crazy.
I mean, maybe, all the spinning actually, like, she had a broken nose. Maybe it like snapped back into place from the G forces of the gurney, like spinning around. Yeah, not a good day to be in a medevac in the first place and then to get stuck in that situation. Not ideal. Not an ideal situation.
Yeah, no kidding. Congratulations,
Well,
grandma. That's a tough one.
Well, speaking of not ideal situations, the EMAS system, which for those who don't know the full acronym, and I had to look it up myself, Engineered Materials Arresting System, which is basically those overruns on the end of the runway that allow an aircraft to kind of slowly sink, if facing an overrun, saved two business jets last week. I'm not sure if they were on business or if they were on charter or they were doing 91, but this is actually kind of amazing. Like you look at safety from the perspective of, oh, okay, things are eventually going to happen. Like we don't have a world in which accidents never ever occur, but it's technology like this that makes those accidents not fatal. No one was hurt in these incidents. So I just think it's a really cool technology, and it's nice to see it in action and working. Not that we like crashes, at least my own
Yeah,
crashes.
there was two in 24 hours. On Wednesday, a Gulfstream G150 arriving from Baltimore Washington International, shout out Jessie's hometown, overran a rain-slicked 5,000-foot runway at Chicago Executive Airport, but was stopped short of a major roadway by EMAS, according to the FAA. Then, hours later, a Bombardier Challenger 300 carrying four people overran the runway at Boca Raton Airport, where the arresting system again prevented the aircraft from leaving the airport property. So this is, I mean, I think that if there's any non-believers in EMAS, I'm not 100% sure why you would be, but I think that if
Mhm.
you were, it's two injury-free outcomes on two overruns in one day. I mean, I would say that that investment, I mean, the agency funded $8.5 million EMAS installation at Philadelphia International, 117 systems total. This seems like a no-brainer, unless it's like I mean, the only reason I could see you arguing against it is if it's like a 10,000-foot runway, like secondary for the space shuttle. Outside of that, it's like, feels like, whatever the price is, it's worth it. But if you see the pictures, this is what, like, I don't fully understand the technology here. Like, I wish that I was way more of a science person. I don't. It looks like wet concrete, kind of, or like quicksand a little
Mhm.
bit. It's like the sand in a truck runaway stop, and then like that's exactly what it does, is it just stops you dead in your tracks.
Exactly. And that's what's interesting is I started reading more about this today because I knew about the system, but not exactly like who was building it and what it was made of. There's only one company in the country that does this system. They cost $2 to $6 million depending on, what project it is. But yeah, it's some sort of like cellular. There's a new one that's like a silica, and the other former versions are like concrete that are meant to like collapse and not damage the aircraft. That's the other piece of this too, is that it should avoid any like substantial damage, probably a landing gear shot, but the rest of the aircraft should come to a rest. But I gotta say something about PWK specifically here because I used to have a base there. This is the fourth known EMAS arresting saving. People do not realize, what PWK is a 5,000-foot runway. If it gets slick, if it's icy, it's very hazardous. So honestly, I'm always a little surprised when something happens there, knowing the history of that airfield and how short it is and how susceptible it is to Chicago weather. So I'm glad the system is there. I think it should be at a lot more airports. Some people rely on just having a really long grass area that an aircraft can move through. But if you look at pictures of this, the nose of the G150 was right in traffic. There's a 2-lane highway right at the end of the runway. So they came off the EMAS, went past the EMAS, and just nosed over into traffic. So thankfully, again, nothing happened, but it's a treacherous airport that people need to pay a lot of attention to.
Yeah, it kind of seems like this is two times what this year that we've covered something happening in the Chicago metro area. It's
Mhm.
just kind of, it's a precarious place.
Yeah. Yeah, just keep all that stuff in mind. Runway excursions are on the rise. They have been for quite some time. So I did hear Brian Bedford, the FAA administrator, he was talking positively about EMAS and the great things that it does. So I hope this means a lot more funding for airports to get EMAS systems that need them. They're obviously life saving, and we can't control for everything in the cockpit. So let's build more systems around people to.
If you are looking for an aircraft that can handle shorter runways, like a Falcon 900 or something similar that can really stop on short runways, you can now go to what is being called the Zillow for business jets. And that's the idea behind Aero Ventures' brand new digital marketplace. They launched it this week out of Miami with the idea that it's going to be AI powered valuations and transactions with human brokers that are behind it. Super interesting being tech front and forward. So Aero Ventures is the first, or is the company that has launched this two-sided marketplace out of Miami. It is Bill Pamparelli, right? Am I saying his name right?
Really? That
Paparelli?
sounds good.
Sorry, Bill.
Sorry.
Bill
Sorry,
Paparelli.
Bill.
Bill Papar Paparillia. I'm still probably butchering it. Anywho, he brought on the JetSmarter founder, which has a even harder name to say, Sergey Petrosov, who has built this marketplace. It's a client-facing front end that enables users to browse available aircraft, and then human aircraft brokers will still be involved in the buying and selling process after they browse it. So another buy sell marketplace has hit the market.
Mhm.
What do you think, Jesse? You have bought and sold your fair share of aircraft in the past.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm honestly not the biggest expert when it comes to acquisitions. So I'm gonna let you talk about that. But I do think the backgrounds of these two founders are very interesting here. So Bill, he sold to VistaJet, which also JetSmarter did as well. But he sold JetEdge. He was the founder and CEO of JetEdge. Sold that for a reported 600 to 750 million dollars back in 2022. So he's got the cash, he's got the know-how. And on top of that, Sergey, people said what they can say about JetSmarter, but it was a highly successful platform. Great at marketing, great platform. Whether or not people like the product or not is a totally different story, or the operators like the product. But I think these two guys, if someone's going to do it, maybe them.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. I think it's really interesting. Oh, I got to get a live demo. I was actually going to go click around on the site, but I can't. That's unfortunate. But it is a two-sided marketplace, which is controlled by a broker. And so here is the hard part in building two-sided marketplaces. I was on a team a few years ago that was building a two-sided marketplace, and you have two competing factors. You have supply and demand. You have to bring both in order to have a successful two-sided marketplace. Now, this is going to sound a little harsh for those that are listening, but here's the deal. What it seems like, according to the press release, is this is a fancy marketplace listing of Aero Ventures aircraft, right? There is no way anybody else is going to put their aircraft on Aero Ventures marketplace. That is the biggest problem. In two-sided marketplaces, you have to be unbiased. You cannot insert yourself in the middle of the main transaction. So if you are like, let's say you're RV share and you own a bunch of RVs and you're putting them all on there, well, people are like, oh, well, RV share is competing with me and they're going to steal leads that are interested in my RV and give it to other people. I think that's the biggest problem here is that marketplaces have to maintain independence. So if you look at the big one, is controller.com. It's owned by Sandhills. Sandhills does not broker airplanes. They own a bunch of two-sided marketplaces, but at the end of the day, they are unbiased. You look at Trade a Plane, you look at Barnstormers, which is a crazy website. You look at aircraftforsale.com, you look at Global Air. There's a lot of these transaction marketplaces that exist. The thing is no one at any of those companies is actually actively brokering aircraft, which means that the Aero Ventures marketplace will only have Aero Ventures involved aircraft. Now they do some asset financing, for some floor plan stuff is, my understanding. They inventory aircraft, but at the end of the day, they are probably going to be limited in market size because they're not going to get the Guardian jets or the Jet Avivas or the O'Gara jets or any of these players to list their aircraft because at the end of the day, Aero Ventures is going to swoop in. A lot of my broker friends say the best way to get an acquisition agreement is to have a listing because someone's going to call and that aircraft doesn't fit. And so you say, oh, well, this isn't a good fit for you, but is anybody helping you buy an airplane? They help them out along the way and they sign them up for an engagement letter. So the goal being, let's see, I'm going to pull this article back up. Aero Ventures focuses on transactions above 10 million, which puts them firmly in the heavy jet category or the newer super mid-sized aircraft. The platform is free for existing aircraft owners and qualified aircraft buyers, the latter of which he described as those who fly privately 50 or more hours annually. They've conducted 4 billion in business jet transactions in the last 15 years via Bill Paparelia. I'm still jacking that up. It is an AI platform, and the goal is at least $1 billion in pre-owned jet transactions annually. So this also brings up another interesting point. I wrote a pretty long article on the inefficient private jet hypothesis. And it's the entire idea that all the efficient market hypothesis says that all information is known that is known, and therefore the market is incredibly efficient. The problem is that all market data is not known in private aviation. There is no public listing site for the value of the aircraft. They are claiming that they're going to fix this by using AI and bringing front and center the idea of transparent pricing. All for it. I think it's a great idea. The problem is you have to have so much proprietary data that nobody else has, and I'm not 100% sure if that is the case. Well, I was going to say the other problem is that their addressable market of being $1 billion in transactions at $10 million and up, that's a lot of transactions. In my article, I referenced some JetNet data that showed the total transaction volume. Now, this is not 100% science because JetNet doesn't necessarily always have everyone, and it registers some inventory deals and not. But if you look at Jetcraft, 52 transactions, Guardian Jet, 49 transactions, CFS Jets, 40 transactions, QS Partners, 40 transactions, Jet Aviva, 39 transactions, Pro, 32, Worldwide Option, 31, Soul Jets, 20. There's just not enough concentration in an individual brokerage to hit that type of scale in the near term. I think that's the biggest challenge that they have here. Cool idea. Love the idea of using AI to bring forward valuations, but that's my random rant on aircraft transactions.
Well, I see some market opportunity here, and maybe I should be charging someone for this advice. But one of the things that I'm looking at here is if they can provide good data, and I do a lot of the same stuff at PASA. I'm trying to provide like really good data to people to bring them to the platform. If they actually pull in real aircraft histories, transactions, documents, if they can pull together enough really, really good information for the entire marketplace and become a source of truth, then they may be able to like pull in these broker partnerships and other things that are happening. I don't know if that's ultimately what the plan is, but again, too, so many of these things are off-market transactions, not public information. I know there's some people who don't like that and want to make things a lot more transparent, but we're not like the MLS. We don't have real estate, the same things that the real estate industry does. Maybe they're trying to push us to that, which I think is an interesting concept, and I wish them luck. But I do agree with you. They're going to have so much proprietary information. Where are they going to get it from? How are they going to aggregate it and actually make it available to people that find value in it? And that's not just the people buying the airplanes. It's the four or five other people involved in the transaction as well. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, no, I think it's much needed innovation in the space. Just my experience of bruising in two-sided marketplaces is that you have to be more unbiased than that, or the alternative is you have to have such huge scale of transaction volume that you don't need anybody else, right? So I think that that's kind of their play is They don't need anybody else's inventory because they have enough inventory themselves. They've made a couple of splashy hires over the last 6 months. I mean, Steve Main went over there from Mente Group. There's a couple of other folks that have joined the team recently. And so I think that they're positioning themselves to kind of make a really good run at a kind of hyper scaled brokerage. But brokerage is such a hard business to scale. I think if you're going to scale it into something that is less human driven, I think this is a great way to approach that problem. I just think getting to that type of transaction volume per year trading on your platform is hard. It's
Yeah.
just a very, very hard problem to solve. I think that they've got the minds to do it and the capital to do it because they have patient capital. I mean, both founders have had exits. I mean, there's,
Mhm.
probably a lot more patience than there would be in venture capital. So it's interesting. I mean, I'm curious to find out. I would love a login just so I can poke around and give feedback. So, Bill, if you're listening, sorry for butchering your name, but would love to take a look inside. And take a look and give my honest feedback. I mean, I think this needs to happen. There's a lot of
Mhm.
talk of this type of program existing. There's a lot of
Yeah.
talk of people wanting to disrupt controller and the traditional models. That being said, it's going to be challenging. But I wish them all the best, and I hope that it works.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, it's like you said, it's not an efficient market. It needs it. So let's see if Sarah Gay can figure out how to turn the tech into this and make it successful.
Yeah, exactly. Well, while that venture blossoms, another venture is shutting down, unfortunately. Shell has pulled the plug on what was said to be one of Europe's largest sustainable aviation fuel plants. The Rotterdam facility, once expected to churn out over 800,000 tons of biofuels a year, half of it for aviation, won't be moving forward after Shell deemed the project, quote, insufficiently competitive. The decision underscores the tension between climate goals and commercial realities as industry voices warn that without stronger policy incentives, Europeans' SAF movement could stall just as the airlines are under pressure to decarbonize. So, unfortunately, a little bit of a step back for climb dot faster dot.
Yeah. So Shell started building this back in 2022. And I think in that year, they stopped building and they took an almost $1 billion write off, which honestly for Shell is probably like nothing, right? I don't even know how much they make, but it's like an ungodly amount of money. But essentially, yeah, what this is coming down to is the CEO, he's pulling out of a lot of these projects because he's saying, like, look, at the end of the day, the airlines are going to have to foot the bill for this, or we're going to have regulators that are willing to kind of, get it set up and then take it over at some point, but they're not going to do it on their own. So they're pulling out of a lot of these deals. It'll be curious to see, come 4 or 8 or whoever knows how much years later, when political winds change back to sustainability and climate change, if they'll start to get back into the projects or not. But I think what they're saying today is it's just too expensive. We can't find a way to do this and really make any money. There doesn't seem enough demand at the moment to do it. And it's just not really the ideal time for SAF. Maybe later.
Yeah. I wish we had a team of editors so that they could go pull the clip of me talking about SAF a couple of months ago saying, I love the idea of SAF. The problem is that it is really hard to make it commercially viable without a lot of subsidies. And so you have these conflicting, you have regulation which says get carbon neutral, and then you have the commercialization that says fossil fuels are really cheap. And those two things are in constant tension right now. And so it's not commercially viable, and the market's not necessarily going to demand it unless forced. And I think this is an example that basically you can't force SAF. You have to come at it from basically either, unfortunately, overbearing regulation or companies saying, hey, we care about the environment. We're all going to team up and band together. I think that it's unfortunately, this is the least shocking news that I've heard about SAF yet. It
Yeah.
just isn't commercially viable. It's the same thing as electric aircraft. The idea of electric aircraft is great, but when the reality is that you can only take 4 passengers like 100 nautical miles, it just becomes not commercially viable. And the
Yeah.
market forces are so much stronger than I think a lot of people give them credit for.
Yeah, and one of the comments that was made in one of these articles was that, look, at the end of the day, aviation worldwide is only responsible for 2.5% of emissions. So if we're going to start, regulating and pushing cost on certain industries, like it's not the low hanging fruit. Airplanes are already as efficient as they can be. Look, I'm not saying they don't burn a ton of jet fuel, but they do. But airlines for generations have been trying to reduce that cost and reduce fuel burn in the first place. So would love to see something like this happen, but it's got to come from the industry. If regulators aren't willing to spend taxpayer dollars on subsidies, then it's not happening today.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, hopefully at some point, but I just don't know if SAF, and I've heard a lot of people say the same thing. I think a lot of people want SAF to work, but the reality is that it just doesn't create enough commercial viability in the long run to have long-term staying power. I mean, there's so much cost associated with moving SAF and storing SAF and getting aircraft ready to take SAF and all of the regulatory stuff. It's just like I don't know if SAF is it. But the problem is I don't know what is, right? Like hydrogen's a really long way away, and then it's like what else?
Battery power, we'll steer very, very, very far on battery power, but it's going to happen. Things will happen, but they're going to happen at their own pace. As much as we want to force things to happen tomorrow, that's just not how technology and evolution of industries works.
Yeah, exactly. But there is one group that is evolving by using, and this is a tie-in to what last week we were talking about this exact topic. Back in the safety corner with Jessie, we're talking about flight monitoring and data, and we were complaining that there was nothing happening in the US, and then all of a sudden a story comes out and it totally is related.
Yeah, I'm excited this week. This is like two safety stories in one week. Jesse's like all giddy about these safety things. But yes, so the TBM Private Pilots Group, this is a general aviation thing, not necessarily charter or business aviation. This is just a group of
Hey,
pilots.
people charter TVMs, Jesse. Don't
That's
knock
right.
it till you
That's
try
right.
it, okay?
Hey, I love it. Actually, it's my dad's favorite plane. He's like, he wants one of those so badly. So no, I love Air. Don't, not judging. But okay, most of these pilots in this pool are general aviation pilots. But this group of pilots has come together. There's 50 members so far that have flown over 70,000 accident-free flight hours. So congratulations, guys and gals. But they're setting up they've already set up an independent flight data monitoring program. Part of this is helped by the TBM system. It's called Me and My TBM, which helps scores pilots on their stabilized approaches and other information. But what they've done now is they've pulled together the ADS-B data with the scores of these pilots, and they're showing significant correlations on safety based on how they're flying and their flight data monitoring. So I love it. I think it's really cool that these people are getting together on their own without anyone asking them to. I think there is some insurance incentive potentially because there was insurance companies kind of involved in some of these press releases. But very cool and love to see it. Love to see more of this everywhere at some point.
Yeah, market forces once again driving a lot of that. I want to give a quick shout out to someone in the TBM ecosystem that I'm gonna bet was probably a big driver of this. So Wayman Loy, again, butchering names, Luy. Wayman, I've always just known him as Wayman. Wayman has been on the board of SAFE, which is a safety alliance in general aviation, really involved in the TBM ecosystem. I think he's like most everybody's transition training pilot when they buy a TBM. I think he might have worked for TBM for a period of time, but I would bet that he is probably a pretty big champion of this movement inside of Daher because making that big push on safety, he's kind of been on a lot of the panels. He is really the voice of safety in general aviation. So I'm going to go ahead and guess and preemptively give him a shout out because I bet no one else is giving you a shout out, but this smells and sounds a whole lot like Wayman type efforts.
And what a thing, I mean, for the OEMs, I think this is the big reason why TBM, and this is kind of kicking off with them, because they've enabled this technology through their application so that it's accessible to anyone. You don't get into a lot of other airplanes and automatically have an app that's doing your FDM for you, right? So, like, the manufacturer is rolling this out. This could be a game changer, especially for single pilot operations or, charter fleets that are small operators that don't have the ability to really come up with their own FDM program. If you're rolling it out as a manufacturer, that can make your airplane a lot more marketable, especially if in the long term you end up with lower incident and accident rates. So I think it's really cool. Hats off to the team doing it and Daher for kind of enabling this technology to be easy for people to use.
I would bet that there are some others that take note here, and probably I would bet two of TBM's pretty big competitors.
Mm-hmm.
One that rhymes with Prepic, and the other one that rhymes with Liper. Doesn't neither of those real words. But I would imagine that we see something similar come out from other single engine turboprops because single engine turboprops fit in a very unique part of the insurance market. As
Mhm.
someone who works with buyers and sellers all the time, I have a lot of owners stretching into these things. I mean, we're talking they're buying a TVM at 300 hours of total time with no retract, usually stepping up out of a SR22T because that fits the profile. They want to go higher, faster, longer, burn Jet A. And the reality is you can technically fly one under FAA rules, but your insurance premium is going to be insanely expensive. And so there's a lot of stretching that happens in the single engine turboprop market that I think probably is unique to that specific aircraft type. And so that's another reason why I think that this is huge is that it creates a framework for insurance to get lower. It creates, and eventually maybe you can have personalized insurance. It's one thing that I hear a ton of complaints about from owner flown pilots is why am I getting lumped in? I'm 45,
Mhm.
healthy, all of this. I get lumped in with the 65-year-old guy because we have the same total time, and that's unfair.
Right.
And so personalized insurance rates, I think, is probably a net byproduct from this. Now, will we ever get there? Maybe, hopefully, that'd be really cool. And I know a lot of owner flown pilots that would be excited for personalized insurance rates based off of their flying, not based off of their group of pilots that they're getting benchmarked off of.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, aviation, we're always at least a couple decades behind the auto industry. They have it now, so maybe it's coming soonish.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, that wraps us up for the VIP seat. I know for some of us, we are headed to Washington, D.C. to the JetNet IQ Summit. So if you are a listener, I will be there. I'll be in attendance out there in the audience with you. So if you see me, look for my bald head and wave. I'll be out there in Washington, D.C. this week. I'll also be at the Tennessee Business Aviation Static Display in Chattanooga, which is a very niche event. But if you're there as well, we'd love to meet up. If you like our show, the number one thing you can do to help us, and even if you don't like the show, we'd still like you to do this, is to share it with a friend because we want to help grow and be a positive voice in the business aviation community. We bring you your news in a bite-sized format and really help keep you informed. We hear from a lot of listeners that it's one of their favorite podcasts to add to the player. We are humbly honored and thankful that you would listen to us. So share it with your friends. Like and subscribe on YouTube. That's a big growth mechanism for us is going on the YouTubes. Uh, Go like us on LinkedIn, follow us on Apple, give us a 5-star rating or a 4-star rating if you think the show's so, but really just give us a 5-star rating. Subscribe on Spotify. Subscribe to the newsletter at thevipseat.com where we outline all of these digests. We put a lot of links for further reading so that you can get smarter and sound smarter at cocktail receptions like the one at JetNet IQ. And until next week, I'm Preston Holland with Prestige Aircraft Finance. Jessie Naor is with PASA at flyingprivate.org, and we will see you next week.